"Let's slip away," I said softly, my voice steady and low, cutting through the hum of the lounge. She didn't pause, nor did her partner, their half-finished cocktails left behind on the table, glinting under the dim lights. My husband stirred beside me, his hand grazing mine, a quiet tension in his grip. Across from us, her fingers rested lightly on her partner's arm, a gesture that spoke volumes without a word. The four of us moved as one, no need for debate, the air heavy with what we all understood. We wove through the crowd, past the clink of glasses and laughter, out into the cool night. "They're like that, you know," I said later that evening, twirling my drink as I lounged on the hotel bed, watching my husband. He cradled his glass, his knuckles whitening briefly before he eased his hold. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice cautious, though his eyes met mine with a spark of curiosity. I smiled, slow and deliberate. "The pair from the beach today." His brow twitched, and I ran my finger along the edge of my glass. "If we wanted them, they'd be here." He set his drink down with a careful thud, his expression unreadable. "You're not serious." I tilted my head, letting my silk scarf slip slightly, catching the way his gaze darted before he steadied himself. "Aren't I?" His breath came out in a quiet huff, his leg shifting as if testing the weight of my words. "You're really suggesting this?" I leaned back against the headboard, relaxed but deliberate. "We're here to enjoy ourselves, aren't we?" His fingers tapped once against his thigh. "And this is your idea of enjoyment?" I reached out, brushing my hand along his arm, feeling the warmth beneath his sleeve. "I think it could be, and I think you're intrigued, even if you won't say it." He hesitated, his eyes narrowing slightly. I pressed on, my tone light but pointed. "She couldn't keep her eyes off you earlier." That struck a nerve. His breath hitched, just for a moment. "She was just chatting," he muttered, then stopped, shaking his head as if to dismiss it. "Chatting," I echoed, with a soft laugh. His throat bobbed as he glanced toward the window, the city lights spilling in. "And him?" His voice dropped, quieter now. I held his gaze. He didn't mind, seemed to enjoy it actually. A beat passed, charged and still. I leaned closer, my voice a whisper. "Be honest, if I said we could invite them, would you?" He didn't answer, but his silence was loud enough. I pulled back, sipping my drink with a faint smirk. "Good, because tomorrow we'll see where it goes." The next evening arrived in a blur. We found them easily, their silhouettes sharp against the glow of the rooftop bar. She sat perched on a stool, legs crossed, idly spinning a straw in her drink, while he leaned in, his words a low hum against her ear. The moment their eyes caught ours, the shift was instant, unspoken, effortless. I stepped closer, offering a small, knowing smile. "Didn't expect to run into you here," I said, testing the waters. She turned, her gaze steady, a flicker of amusement dancing in it. "Didn't you?" Her tone was playful, a quiet invitation. Behind me, my husband exchanged a few words with hers, small talk that floated on the surface while the real current ran deeper. I let my elbow graze hers as I reached for a coaster, the brief contact warm and intentional. "Having a good night?" I asked. She tilted her head, considering. "Better now." Her smile curved, subtle but sure, her focus locking onto me moyens. "Let's get out of here," I murmured again, and we stepped into the night. The villa's door closed with a soft thud behind us, the warm flicker of string lights bathing the patio in a golden haze. The distant hum of cicadas filled the air, thick with the scent of jasmine. We moved naturally, no words needed. My husband settled onto the wicker sofa beside me, his hand resting on his knee, flexing once before stilling. Across from us, the other man leaned back in his chair, one arm draped casually along the edge, his posture easy but alert. She took her time, easing down next to my husband, her bare shoulder brushing his arm, not by chance, not shyly. "You're awfully calm tonight," she said, her voice teasing as she glanced at him. He let out a slow breath, a half smile tugging at his lips. "Just soaking it in." She grinned, setting her drink aside. "Smart move." Beside me, the man shifted, his hand settling lightly on my leg, a question in the touch. I didn't pull away. She noticed, her eyes flicking back to my husband, her fingers drifting along his forearm, slow and deliberate. "No need to stay so still," she teased. His jaw tightened, just a fraction. I traced a light pattern over the man's hand, my voice soft and lazy. "She's got a point." My husband's fingers twitched, caught in the pull of restraint and something else. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his ear. "I think you secretly enjoy the chase." His lips parted, but he stayed quiet. The man beside me edged nearer, his voice a low murmur at my ear. "And you?" I tilted toward him, feeling the heat of his closeness. "Why don't you see for yourself?" His grip tightened slightly. Across from me, my husband exhaled, sharp and unsteady, as she pressed in, her touch lingering a moment too long. His hands rose, not to stop her, but to meet her, resting lightly on her hips. She smiled, playful yet knowing, her fingers brushing down his chest. "You're wound up tight," she said with a laugh. I watched, smirking, as his head tipped back, his breath catching. Then she leaned in, her kiss slow and sure, his hands steadying her, holding the moment. Beside me, the man's touch grew bolder, his fingers tracing my side, warm and deliberate. The air thickened, charged, with a quiet hum. She eased closer to my husband, her hands sliding over his legs, teasing unhurried. His breathing deepened, his fingers gripping the cushion as she held him there, her smirk widening. "Let go," she murmured, her voice rich with amusement. His body tensed, every muscle coiled, anticipation threading through him. A shiver ran through him as she drew him in, savoring every second, the space between them dissolving. His head fell back, a rough breath escaping, his restraint fraying at the edges. Beside me, warmth bloomed across my skin, a pull I hadn't anticipated tugging at me. I felt the man's hand slide around my waist, firm and steady, turning me toward him. His breath brushed my neck, deep and controlled, a promise woven into it. "Your move," he whispered, low and dark, his voice vibrating through me. He didn't hesitate, his hold tightening, guiding me with a smooth, instinctive shift. My breath hitched as his fingers traced my frame, pulling me closer, his presence anchoring me in the heat of it. I pressed into him, the air buzzing, each moment rippling through me, warmth curling deep inside. Across from us, she let out a soft, satisfied hum, her pace deliberate, her confidence unshaken. My husband's hands flexed, his body shifting beneath her, his control slipping as she led him further into the rhythm. His breath broke, rough and urgent, his fingers twitching as she held him exactly where she wanted. Behind me, my own pulse raced, heat building, the moment closing in. His grip tightened around me, his breath uneven, the space between us fading into a shared, unspoken pulse. Then the moment deepened, a quiet shift pulling us all into its current. Beside me, the man's hands found my shoulders, warm and steady, turning me into his embrace with a gentle pull. The air buzzed as he drew me closer, his touch soft yet intentional, guiding us into a rhythm that felt both new and charged. My breath quickened, a warm tide rising within me, every subtle movement weaving us tighter into the moment. His fingers traced my back, light patterns sending shivers across my skin. Then he shifted, easing me to face him fully, his hands guiding my hips as we settled into a closer, more intimate stance. Across the sofa, the woman leaned into my husband, her hands resting on his chest, her motions slow and deliberate. His breath hitched, uneven, his hands settling on her arms, holding her as they found their own quiet flow, a shared pulse flickering between them. She moved then, turning to press her back lightly against him, her head tilting to rest near his shoulder as their rhythm adjusted, warm and steady. The connection grew, a gentle crescendo threading through us all. My skin tingled as the man's hold tightened just enough, his breath brushing my ear, a low murmur weaving through the haze. I leaned into it, the sensation building in soft waves, a rush of warmth and light that peaked, leaving me trembling in its wake. He paused, a faint exhale slipping free as the moment settled over us, a calm glow lingering. Across from us, my husband's shoulders tensed, then eased, a soft sound escaping as the woman guided their rhythm to its close, her fingers lingering with a knowing smile. She sighed quietly, content, as their energy softened into stillness, her position relaxed against him. The patio lights bathed us in a golden haze, the scent of jasmine thick in the air, the night's hum blending with our breaths. 4 figures, paired anew, rested in the tender quiet, the faint chirp of cicadas drifting through the stillness.
Most folks say they'd never even consider it, until the chance is staring them in the face. Tell me, if your partner floated something like this, would you dive in without a second thought, or is it a flat-out no? Drop your take in the comments. I'll definitely read every one. If you liked this, hit that like button and subscribe. Don't forget the bell. It helps more than you think and keeps me fired up to bring you stories every day. Catch you in the next one.